Hello everyone, I am Masih Alinejad and this is The World According to Masih, the podcast where we explore global events through unfiltered conversations with outstanding thinkers and changemakers. Today my guest is Tom Kaplan. Tom is a unique expert on Iran. He wears many hats. He's an investor, a businessman, a protector of big cats like lions, tigers. He's also an art collector. Tom has a PhD in history from Oxford University and frequently briefs world leaders on matters related to Middle East.
Americans are ignorant.
Oh no, he's the analyst, so I'm the troublemaker here.
I think we're both troublemakers. I go out of my way to explain I'm speaking to the leadership in Tehran. Now, let me draw a distinction for your audience between regime change and a changing regime.
I am amazed at how an American knows about the history of Iran and trying to, take lesson and actually brief the leaders of free world.
It's over. The regime will never be the same. The first duty of any government is to be able to provide security for their people. If you are a clerical regime, if you're a theocracy, how can you claim to have God on your side when a small group of Jews has destroyed your empire and basically established dominance over the Persian Empire itself?
I see an Iran in you. Hello, everyone. Today, I have the privilege to have a conversation with Tom Kaplan, good friend of mine. He is supporting good cause and big cats, correct? He has a PhD history in Oxford University, correct?
Correct.
But most important than this, he often briefs the leaders of the world, especially in the Middle East. My question is this: how come you never brief the leaders of Islamic Republic? Because they really love you. Kayhan is a big fan of you, Tom.
Yes, I know that I have many, many fans in Iran. Some of them are no longer with us.
Why I say that, Tom? Because October 7, you wrote an article for Wall Street Journal. You actually warned the Islamic Republic leaders. You said pursuing nuclear weapons means death sentence. As you said, we have a lot of dead commanders. Hossein Salami is one of them.
Just one of them. The interesting thing is that much as I do brief leaders in different countries, when I speak publicly or write publicly, as in the Wall Street Journal, my audience is always Iran itself. I go out of my way to explain I'm speaking to the leadership in Tehran. I gave an interview a little over a year ago in which I paused and said, this is a public service announcement to the regime. Whoever greenlit the operation on October 7th will be viewed through the lens of Persian history as having been a complete cretin, a moron, and that they should take an off-ramp with regard to Israel before it's too late, because this would lead not only to the destruction of the regime, but perhaps to the destruction of the empire itself.
Let's just get back again to your article. You said it can be a death sentence for the Islamic Republic. But let's be realistic. Yes, we have dead commanders, which people of Iran celebrated that. But the Islamic Republic survived, so it's not the death of the Islamic Republic.
I think it's fair to say that if one understands Iranian history, and if one understands the nature and the natural history of revolutions, that it is almost inconceivable to me that the regime will not change. Now, let me draw a distinction for your audience between regime change and a changing regime.
I know some in the West, they are allergic of the term regime change. But Iranian people, when they say regime change, it means they want to end this regime. So I don't think it's different, like changing regime or regime change, but I know that in the West, because of the history of Afghanistan, Iraq, people don't want to use the term regime change. So what is your concern?
I'm not concerned about the word regime change. I don't care what people call it. I'm actually talking about two different things. So several weeks ago, I was with a group of analysts who asked me whether an Israeli attack on Iran would cause the people to rally around the flag. And I said, I don't think so. Obviously, had the Israelis gone out of their way to bomb innocent civilians, maybe. But if they were fairly judicious in how they went around their strikes, no. And I said, I know you're going to tell me that in 1980, the regime had even royalists rally around the flag when Saddam Hussein invaded Khuzestan. Correct. But that was a very, very special moment. In revolutions, when the country that has carried out the revolution is attacked by foreign powers, if it's early in the revolutionary fervor, people get very nationalistic and they do rally around the flag. This happened after the French Revolution. This happened during the Russian Civil War that followed the Bolshevik Revolution. And it actually happened in Iran in 1980. But that's not something that represents Persian history or Iranian history. The history of Iran is about dynastic change that's actually brought about, at the very least in part, but sometimes completely, as a result of being humiliated or invaded by foreigners. So let's just take a look at that. The Persian Empire, prior to being attacked by 40,000 Greeks under Iskandar, Alexander the Great, was in a very good place. Only Western historians like Herodotus were talking about Iran being decadent and, losing touch. It wasn't true. The Achaemenid Empire was fine. It was controlling about 40% of the human population on Earth. It extended from Egypt to India. In fact, it was doing so well that the Achaemenid leadership was complacent in not having a big enough standing army. And even when Alexander landed with 40,000 Macedonians, they said, we'll take care of this. 40,000 Greeks took over the largest empire in the world. It was the extinguishing of the Achaemenid Empire. That's number one. Number two, the Persians accepted Alexander and his successor, the Seleucids. They accepted that the dynastic change passed the torch to Alexander. They didn't freak out. They said, this is the way it is. Clearly, Darius III had lost the Farhan, the Far, and it was obviously going to Alexander, who actually married into the Achaemenid royal family. But it was the same with the Parthians that followed the Seleucids, the Arsacids. They too had a great run. They were an amazing adversary against Rome. But ultimately, they had their own issues. They fell, and they were succeeded by Ardashir and the Sasanians. But what killed the Sasanians after hundreds of years? I think the death of the Sasanian Empire is a very interesting case study for what's happening in Iran today. So at what became the end of the Sasanian dynasty, it came a few years after the greatest territorial conquest they'd ever had under Khosrow II. They took advantage of turmoil in Constantinople, in Byzantium, and Khosrow II managed to create the greatest aerial extent of the empire. He was offered the opportunity to sign a very favorable peace treaty with Rome. He could have secured all of his gains. That's how vulnerable the Romans, the Byzantines, felt they were. But instead of taking a brilliant peace that would have been the crowning achievement of the Sasanians, he decided he's going right for Constantinople. He's going for the entire thing. Along came a more capable Roman emperor, Heraclius, and Heraclius outmaneuvered Khosrow II and surprised him by coming into Iran itself through Armenia, not where it was expected in Syria or the Levant. Now, this is extremely important. From its greatest territorial expansion and extent, the attack by Heraclius led to Khosrow II being overthrown, not being the great hero, and murdered by his son Shiroi.
So you used the history. I mean, actually, you calculated everything to give this picture. I am amazed that how an American knows about the history of Iran and trying to, take lesson and actually brief the leaders of free world. But how about Khamenei? Why he miscalculated everything in this war for after 4 decades, saying death to Israel, death to America. It seems that they were not prepared, and unlike you, they thought that people will rally around the flag and support them. What happened? People celebrate the death of the top commanders. They were even, it breaks my heart. It was beyond sad to watch people being upset when they hear about the ceasefire. That doesn't mean they're welcoming bombs, killing innocent people for sure. But they were upset. They were actually making videos, comments on social media and saying, President Trump, what is happening? So what happened, because you know the leaders in the Middle East, that Khamenei miscalculated the whole things. He knew that President Trump is the one killed Qasem Soleimani. He knew that President Trump is the one who walked out from nuclear talk. Then what made this big dictator not calculating about the situation in Iran, was not prepared, and he lost the war? I'm sure you saw his video. He lost all the commanders making video with pale face, and President Trump actually mimicked him and made a video mocking him.
I would say that this is probably the biggest humiliation. And I won't even talk about the Russian Anglo occupation. I think this is the biggest humiliation to the Iranian nation since the Arabs conquered the empire. Since the Arabs brought down the Persian Empire.
But I think this is a humiliation for the entire regime, because as you know that the Iranians always try to tell the rest of the world that Iran itself, the nation, the entire nation, is like hostage in the hand of the Islamic Republic. So this is an humiliation for the regime trying to actually expand their ideology everywhere.
The regime will never be the same. That's why I say the regime will either have to change from within, for example, a military coup led by a Napoleon, or it will be overthrown, and it can be overthrown. There are many, many more tools in the toolkit that could be employed by the Israelis or the Americans to create the conditions for regime change. I think there was a lot that went into the calculation about whether to kill Khamenei and the civilian leadership. The Israeli strategy was to decapitate the military command and control system.
Not the political leaders?
No. They can do that. But it's the same as why the Israelis, when they destroyed Hezbollah, they left all of Lebanon's economic infrastructure intact for two reasons. Number one, it created an incentive for the Lebanese themselves to understand that continuing the war with Israel could affect all Lebanese, not just Tahia in Beirut or the Bekaa Valley, etc. And secondly, you can always destroy economic targets. If the Israelis wanted to destroy Kharg Island or gasoline refineries, they can. You leave that as a way to show there's a future for you if we arrive at an understanding. And what the Israelis wanted to do was to create a possibility that Iran would learn that they really have to accept that the regime has failed. And it's better to have people there who stand as witnesses to the collapse of everything that they've worked for. I want you to think about this for a moment.
Yeah, that's quite...
Think about this for a moment. When America left Afghanistan, Khamenei said that he had predicted, and he had, that the Americans would leave Kabul with their tails between their legs. This was viewed as a great prediction. The war, which took place in 2012 between Israel and Hamas, was declared to be a major victory. All of this reinforced a sense within the regime, which has become more and more fixated on the sense that there will be victory and the Mahdi will be restored. All of this created a false sense of arrogance and hubris. So now let's look at where the regime is today. The one success, if you could call it that, the one achievement that people might consider from the Velayat Fahi regime was that Iran restored an empire from Tehran to Latakia and Beirut to Hodeidah and to Sana'a, the Med and the Red. In other words, you had, in a fashion, the restoration of the Sasanian Empire, but doing it in a way that promoted the universal cause of Velayat Fahi, which was to establish Islamist rule over all of the Middle East. And they looked like they were succeeding. And at the same time, they were accomplishing one of the preconditions for the return of the Mahdi. So the preconditions for the return of the Mahdi were, number one, Velayat Fahi. In their minds, there was no basis for this within Shia religion. Number two, clearly, the best people to interpret Sharia law are clerics. The supreme leader was the ultimate authority, but also the deputy to the Mahdi. Along the way, they added the destruction of Israel because it was a vestige of Khomeini's sense of appreciation for the Palestinians, for helping them in 1979, and his hatred for the Israelis because of the relationship with the Shah, etc. So this became a fetish that had nothing to do with either Iranian history nor Shia Islam.
I'm listening to Iranian. Yeah.
Okay.
They say, you said deputy of Velayat Fahi, they call it Naib bar Haqq Imam Zaman. That's exactly their theory.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, over the last several years, actually, since the time of the Green Movement, the ideological indoctrination of the IRGC and the Basiji went from something like 10 or 15% of their training to over 60 to 70% of their training. Now, we know this. It's not just an Iranian phenomenon. As people become more and more ideological, they become more and more stupid. They become more and more closed to realities. And what happens is that the regime becomes more a vehicle for those who are the most radical, the most strong in their ideological fervor. And the ones who aren't keeping up with them, the people who would urge some moderation is not the right word, because there are no moderates in the regime.
I was going to say that, but you know better than
being, more intelligent and sophisticated, You had Qasem Soleimani, you had Larjani, you had Shamhani, and you had talkative idiots like Salami, Jafari. But basically, the more radical, the more you were able to progress in the regime, and the more that you were able to get the heart and the mind of the supreme leader. Khamenei has made every mistake that one could possibly make, and he's invented new ones, some that even Saddam Hussein didn't make. And this was proved by the events since October 7th. Did the Iranians know that October 7th was coming? Yes and no. They knew that something, the regime.
That was a coordinated war. 4 days before October 7 happened, Ismail Haniyeh and leaders of Hamas were in Tehran meeting with Ali Khamenei. They had private meeting, but there were news and, showing victory. For the Western, the PR was saying that the Islamic Republic was not involved. But within the society, they were showing off that they are part of this coordinated attack.
No question about it. And in the war of 2012, for example, the leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah gave the credit to the Islamic Republic.
Exactly.
And, it's speculated that Ismail Qani was in Beirut meeting with Hezbollah before this happened.
You saw the video that Mossad just created about Ghani, how he sell out all his, fellow commanders.
Yes. That sort of, cynical joke that if Qani was killed, it was most likely by friendly fire.
We're laughing here, Tom. Sorry to interrupt you. Don't forget what you were going to say. But that's what actually Ahmadinejad publicly announced that. And the former minister of intelligence said that some of the top commanders are actually spying for the Israeli government. So, but now, when the war ended, they started to execute ordinary people in accusation of espionage. Mm-hmm. So the commanders either are dead or walking freely. So I really want to know how much of it is true. That's
not my pay grade. I wish I could answer that. I think, though, it's fair to say that when the Israelis warned those who were replacing Salami or Bakari, to ask themselves whether they really want that job, because the Israelis do tend to take out the number two and then the person who follows. I have a feeling that they were listening. Whether they took the advice or not is another story. Clearly, the penetration of Iran by the Mossad, by the Aman military intelligence, was as deep as any intelligence penetration of a major power, as we've seen in decades.
You said that the Israeli targeted the military leaders. So because they didn't aim the political leaders, you're right. Ali Khamenei, Pezeshkian, the president, so-called moderate president, Larijani, the rest of the political leaders, they were relaxed. It could have been easier for the Israeli government to kill them. So that means the Israeli government didn't aim for regime change. If that's a yes, then how come Netanyahu and some of his ministers making videos and saying that why people don't take to the streets, or aiming some other revolutionary based, or the entrance of Evin prison, the notorious prison where all the political prisoners are there. These are a signal of regime change. People kept hearing from Prime Minister Netanyahu and his minister sending signals to the opposition using the word regime change. So there is a lot of confusions. If it was not regime change, why they were sending these signals? I'm not asking the Israeli to do the regime change for us, for sure. Regime change is nothing to be imposed on Iranians by a foreign government. You've heard that 2009, as you mentioned, the Green Movement, 2017, 2019, when the Bloody November happened, 1,500 people got killed. 2022, after the murder of Mahsa Amini, more than 700 people got killed. The main slogan was end of this regime, death to Ali Khamenei and his gang of killers. So basically, that's the demand of Iranians. But there is confusion that whether Israeli wanted to do regime change and they, changed their mind because of President Trump asking them to stop, or you take me there.
We don't know what was happening behind the scenes. We don't know whether the Americans said, that's not something to do yet. If you have to do it military, keep civilians out of it, and theoretically the civilian administration. Now, that's not to say that the Israelis didn't blur the lines. Ali Shamhani is an excellent example of that. Ali Shamhani was military. Ali Shamhani was obviously very intimately involved with the security services, but by this time he was a political advisor to Khamenei, and they still decided he should be on that list. My thinking about that subject and about where people should be on regime change, if I may, we have to step back. We have to put ourselves in the position of those living in Iran who have now seen living proof that the one thing that the regime could claim as a success, the empire, is gone. Then that the entire country is open to the attack by a group of Jews, less than 1/10 of the Iranian population, 1/75 the size of Iran, now has the ability to hit any target in Iran that they want. The first duty of any government is to be able to provide security for their people. So choosing to encircle Israel, choosing to prepare for the destruction of Israel, these are luxuries. The necessity is to be able to ensure that your people are safe. They failed. Even the luxuries, and we know unbelievable amounts of money were spent on creating the axis of resistance, all gone. So Iran has nothing to show for 46 years of giving misery, sacrifice, shame to the country. Nothing to show for it. So the people should be sitting back and saying, okay, if you are a clerical regime, if you're a theocracy, how can you claim to have God on your side when a small group of Jews has destroyed your empire and basically established dominance over the Persian Empire itself? How does that work that you still have any legitimacy whatsoever? And the fact is they do not. So when it comes to regime change itself, ultimately, as you say, this is a choice for the Iranian people. Right now, they do have a choice. The day that Iranians can go into, how should I put it, Jaleh Square, and not be afraid that they're going to be mowed down by the Basiji or by the IRGC, that's the moment when they can decide what they want to do with their future. By the way, there's another way that this can come, and this is why I say regime change is not always regime change. This country may very well find that what they really want is a new Napoleon, someone who will finally say, look, the revolution's over, clearly hasn't worked. We are going to focus all of our attention on giving the people a better life. But we're not going to do it in a way that is chaotic and that leads to the separatism, because if the Israelis really want to go after Iran, they can start using proxies the same way as Iran used proxies for decades.
I get that. People of Iran, they did their best to overcome their fear. They paid huge price. But here we're talking, I'm sure that next wave will be much heavier because the anger is there. I'm sure about this. But here we're talking about the responsibility of international community, because I know that you were a big supporter of woman life freedom, Zan Zendegi Azadi. But the reality is when people manage to shake the regime, we see that the leaders across the globe go there and shake the hand of the regime, like the way that President Obama did, the way that President Macron and, Prime Minister Canada, I forgot his name because he's irrelevant now. Tell me, Justin Trudeau. They hesitate to designate the Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. They didn't even call them, the way that they are, terrorists. So, but this war showed that the Islamic Republic is a paper tiger. And it shows that when it comes to real war, they're not good at fighting in real wars. They're really good at fighting against innocent women, unarmed people, blinding them intentionally, gassing schoolgirls. My heart is broken. Executing innocent protesters. About me and you, unarmed people, sending killers to get rid of me, to get rid of you and your friends. You know that very well. Transnational repression. You're familiar with that. Tell me that military actions against terrorist regime, how the democratic countries should see this. Because I saw some of the democratic countries like Germany supported that, the military action against the terrorist regime. How democratic countries sees the military. And let me tell you another thing. You remember when the Islamic Republic attacked Pakistan and killed Baluchi? What was the reaction?
The Pakistanis immediately fired back.
Exactly.
And the reaction then was that the Iranian foreign minister, went to Islamabad and basically begged forgiveness, showing what the Western countries should have understood for many, many, many years, which is the Iranians, the regime, they're like children. They can't resist touching a hot stove, no matter how many times you tell them. You have to make it extremely clear. The regime are essentially extremists on par with Nazis and Bolsheviks. And it was a Leninist precept that use your bayonet, shove it in. If it encounters mush, keep pushing. If it encounters steel, stop and think about withdrawing. The West did not show steel. They only showed mush. And I can tell you, having spoken to so many, in Western leaderships over the years, they've always had a far greater fear of Iranian retaliation than was justified. I've always said what the Iranians really want to understand, maybe not publicly, but intellectually, is what are the real red lines? Tell us what the red lines are. Don't say, what should the red line be? Say, this is the red line, and if you cross it, you're done. In other words, what the Israelis should have done for years is that if they're being struck by Hamas or Hezbollah, the return address should not have been the Palestinians or the Lebanese. The return address should have been Iran itself, the mothership, and the Iranians would have gotten the message. If you stop, we stop. But instead, they got away for years with this convenient fiction that proxies were not simply wholly owned subsidiaries of the mothership, when they were. It took a long time for them to get the message that using the Houthis or using popular mobilization units or using Hezbollah would be met with attacks on Iran itself. If for no other reason, both sides understand these are the red lines. Now, Israel has possibility if it wishes, and a lot will depend on how the regime in Tehran plays this out, to be able to use its own proxies. There are a lot of forces in Sistan, Baluchistan, in Khuzestan or Arabistan, Kurdistan, the Azeri areas, if you start removing Basiji bases and IRGC bases in those areas, you can have a very changed dynamic, which causes even more panic in Tehran. There are so many ways that Iran's enemies can play this. There's only one smart move for the regime, and that is accepting that there will not be a nuclear program, accepting that ballistic missiles will not be happening any longer, accepting that proxies and terrorism, basically the Quds Force, should be dismantled.
Do you really trust them to accept these things? Let me be very clear. 3 countries involved in this war claim victory, each of them. The U.S. believe that they, turned $1 trillion to dust by attacking Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, without putting their boots on the ground. It's a victory for President Trump. He announced that. For Islamic Republic, the billboard of Ali Khamenei everywhere, basically you see that President Trump kneeling in front of Ali Khamenei, and they claim a victory because they think they survived. For Israeli, so yeah, they killed all the top commanders and they attacked the nuclear sites. In my opinion, yes. All these 3 countries can claim victory because the Islamic Republic is still in power, in control, and only people. They paid huge price without choosing this war and without being part of the negotiation. Now President Trump say that the US government don't need even to get a nuclear deal because there is no nuclear enrichment in Iran. Who you think that really won the war? People lost.
No question. Israelis and Americans, let's put it like this, won all the battles. Mm-hmm. As far as winning the war is concerned, that can play out in several ways. You could have a Napoleon who rises, doubles down on revolutionary practice, mm-hmm. In which case he will lead his country to complete ruin. You could have a Napoleon which arises who says, you know what? We have to put the past behind us. Mm-hmm. We're Iranians. We've had setbacks before. We will revive again, but clearly it's no longer in our interest to pursue reckless policies. It's in our interest to make Iran great again through economic reform, lifting of sanctions, reintegrating with the rest of the world. That's a possibility. Does that mean regime change completely? Maybe not.
So you kind of saying within this regime, they could reform?
Well, here's the thing. In order to be able to rule Iran, whoever is going to rule it has to have the loyalty, at least of the Artesh, at least of the regular army. You are going to need someone with bayonets. That's why I use the Napoleon example. So Napoleon, when he essentially pulled off a coup, he ended the revolution. But he put it in a nice way. The revolution has found its bayonets. So whoever can take over can say something along the lines of the revolution has found its economic renaissance. I mean, there are many ways to be able to couch a complete and utter defeat into a victory. One way that I laid out with John Kerry, because John Kerry was viewed as maybe the only person left in the United States who had empathy for the regime. He and I were on complete opposite sides of the nuclear issue. But we basically said...
I was shocked when I saw your article with John Kerry. It was Wall Street Journal offering negotiation or diplomacy.
Basically offering, in essence, a ultimatum.
The Islamic Republicans do not understand language of diplomacy. Their language of diplomacy is hostage-taking, dual national citizens. Right now, French citizens are being used like bargaining chip. That's why I want you to get us there, that how. If it was ultimatum, that's different. But if you still offering like this regime can be reformed within this government, I don't think that is going to be a scenario because there are 3 pillars help the Islamic Republic to survive. Death to America, death to Israel, and women. Of course, women are not now resisting and not showing, they don't obey Sharia laws in Iran, for sure. But at the same time, they still want to wipe up Israel from the map.
The regime.
The regime. So how come you think they're going to end up their ideology?
I have faith in the Iranian people. I draw strength from Ferdowsi, Rumi, Omar Khayyam. There is a great civilization there. Unfortunately, great civilizations can be hijacked by gangsters who hold their own people hostage. We saw this in Germany. Going into the 20th century, Germany was perhaps the most enlightened country in Europe. The French, of course, would perhaps argue that point. But the reality was German civilization was at a very, very high level. The Nazis claimed to be the heirs to Goethe and Beethoven. But the Nazis could not claim to be heirs of civilization when they were the height of barbarism. And I would put it this way. This regime in Tehran has no more right to be the heirs to Hafez and Ferdowsi than the Nazis had to be the heirs to Goethe and Beethoven. And this is really important. Germany put that past behind them and went on to great strength. Iran can too. Not with this regime. This regime has no basis for any legitimacy in accomplishing anything. They're even incompetent at being able to use violence.
You know what? You made me I'm emotional when I hear from an American mentioning about Hafez, Ferdowsi. I've never heard their names from the leaders of my beloved country. And that's what you said. That means we are like hostage in the hand of this regime. I'm amazed how you get into this. I see an Iran in you. What happened to you being interested in the Middle East, especially in Iran?
Let me put it like this.
I had to ask this question.
In 2019, I had concluded that the regime was going to attack a very large economic installation in Saudi Arabia. I didn't know which one, but I knew it would be in the eastern province, Aramco. And there were many, many reasons for this. And I informed my friends in the Gulf at the highest level that in the not too distant future, and I made this prediction in April, that Iran would attack an Aramco installation.
So you mean that you made the prediction about Aramco publicly, or you just briefed the leaders of?
Just the leaders.
Okay.
In July of that year, I met with some of the leadership, and I said, I've refined my prediction to a 72-hour window before the Israeli elections in September. Within that window, on September the 14th, which is my birthday.
Say it again, September?
September 14th is my birthday.
11 September.
Okay. That explains so much about us, Masih. The attack took place. Wow. I received a call from one of those leaders who asked me to come see him. And he said to me, I have to know how, months in advance, you could have known the date. I even told him the time would be 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said, how could you know that? And I said, because in a previous life, I was a Persian. He's obviously an Arab, and he looked at me with very wide eyes. And I said, I'll tell you something. I have very, very smart children. But still, and they're Jewish, but still, when they do something unusually sophisticated and clever, I say, that's my Persian. It's in my heart. It always has been. And even though I know I can't go back to Iran one day, my dream, I've been to 109 countries, my dream is to visit Iran, to do a cultural excursion to Hamadan, to Ekbatana, to Susa, to Persepolis, to Pasar Gadai. This is my dream.
Now it's the dream of Iranians as well to go back to Iran and have. Tom, I will definitely invite you to Iran very soon. You mentioned about your relation with the leaders of Persian Gulf. So we hardly heard about, like, from the leaders of Arab countries showing their sympathy with the Islamic Republic, especially the top commanders being killed. Did you hear anything from them? I haven't. And I have to say that Ben Salman mentioned, and he said Ali Khamenei is another Hitler. At the same time, he used China as a mediator to normalize the diplomatic relation between two countries, the Islamic Republic and Saudi Arabia. They opened their embassies. We both know that the October 7 happened because the Islamic Republic wanted to prevent the Abraham Accord. Saudi Arabia might sign it, no? How do you see this? Like, under Islamic Republic, they really can have a normal relation. They can be allies and friends under Islamic Republic, I'm talking.
Never more than frenemies, friends, enemies. Look, the rapprochement, normalization of relations between the Gulf states and Iran has to be seen through the prism of a lack of confidence that the United States would be there for them in the event of a confrontation with Iran. And the proof of that for them was September 14th, 2019, when there was no American reaction. And even if they thought there would be an American reaction, they clearly had concluded that the Americans would not be there for the long term. In other words, maybe once, one and done, but if the Iranians retaliated, so they chose to think of themselves as a Chihuahua, a little dog with a Persian lion across, and to lower the temperature so that they would not have a potential conflict with Iran, that they felt they would be alone in meeting. Now, I think that the Gulf states assumed that the Israelis would never really attack Iran. And so therefore, it was much better to create a more peaceful environment.
Sitting in their sofa and just watching and enjoying? You know them better than I do. I heard something from President Trump saying, without naming any countries, saying some of those, like, he said that some of those countries who they condemned the attack, privately calling him and thanking him for attacking the nuclear sites.
Well, I think
so. Give me.
I think that President Trump is a better source than I am.
We will bring him here, and we will both.
Nobody has ever had any illusion. The Iranians themselves have never had any illusion that the Gulf states regard Iran as their traditional enemy. Iran's the enemy. Okay. Having said that, you can have détente even with enemies, and at that time, they didn't feel that they had American backing to do anything else but appease Iran. Now, restoring relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia made all the sense in the world. I'm not a big believer in breaking off relations and not having an easy channel to have talks. You make peace with enemies, not with friends, after all. So that didn't mean very much. But the reality is that the Houthis stopped hitting Saudi Arabia. So there were side pockets to that agreement, which clearly benefited both sides. Having said that, for Saudi Arabia, this is a game changer. So when you look at the Abraham Accords, Saudis really didn't have very much to gain from joining the Abraham Accords because they already have military and intelligence relationships with Israel. What they had to gain, and what I think that the Iranians were most scared about, was not the Abraham Accords extending to Israel, because they already know that the Saudis and the Israelis have, an engagement. I believe that what really scared them was the prospect of an American defense pact, because if you look at the relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia from a military standpoint, Iran was able, through proxies and even directly, to attack Saudi Arabia without any fear of retribution. And UAE as well. They were hit, themselves several years ago and were very disappointed in the slow American response. That would have changed completely if America had a defense pact covering Saudi Arabia. It also would have, in many respects, made an Israeli attack against Iran easier, because the Israelis would not have to worry about Iranian retaliation against Saudi Arabia. And I think that's what was encouraging the Iranians to encourage Hamas. But also, I really want to make this point. I don't think the Iranians or Hezbollah ever imagined that the Israelis would be so incompetent as to allow this catastrophe to happen on October 7th. They probably would have thought that some people maybe got through. But had the Israelis acted even a couple of hours earlier, nobody would have gotten through. They would have dealt with them all with the Air Force at the border. So when people say Iran, was directly responsible, Iran was directly responsible because they were the patron of Hamas. And
when you say
Hezbollah.
Iran, my heart is like this. You have to say the regime in Iran, Iranian regime, or Islamic Republic. It's like, Tom, let's just get out of my chest. It's like in the West, I hear people say Taliban. They don't say Afghanistan. So Islamic Republic is like Taliban. It's like ISIS. When you say Iranians and Hamas, my heart is like, no. We are not with Hamas. This is the Islamic Republic. And I want everyone to, differentiate between Iran and Islamic Republic. Is that too much to ask, my friend?
For you, anything, my dear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to know, and finish.
Once I made the mistake, and it was a mistake, of referring to the Gulf as the Arab Gulf. God bless her. The Shabanu
corrected you.
She pulled at my jacket and she said, "It's the Persian Gulf."
Yes.
I said,
okay, you have the history of women
yes.
interrupting you for...
Yes, Your Majesty. I believe that it's for the Iranian people now to either see how far they can go in the streets. I'm not urging people to go out and all get massacred. But the day that the IRGC and the Basiji don't fire on the people, that's the day that the regime will change. If the regime changes from within, where...
is the day when it stops shooting people. Right now that I'm talking to you, they arrested 700 ordinary people, taking revenge on people.
Of course. We know that Iranians know how to conduct a revolution when they want to. And at the end of the day, this is for them. It can be helped by foreign forces doing certain things. But at the end of the day, every people has the government that they deserve.
And when we don't ask the Western government to save us Iranians, but we clearly want them to stop saving the Iranian regime. So my question is this. When, for years and years, dictators, or we see that, dictators are helping each other, backing each other, as Anne Applebaum says in her book, Autocracy, Inc. Like the United Nations, they're voting for each other. Putin government had a seat at the United Nations just a few years ago. The Islamic Republic had a seat at the United Nations to monitor women's rights globally. It is ridiculous, but this is the reality. They are providing military aid, everything. They don't have dictators from Russia to China, Iran. They don't have anything in common, but hating America, crushing democracy. They are together. Where was Putin? He didn't show any support of the Islamic Republic in this war. Where was China? I haven't heard from them as well. What is your take on that? Why they kept quiet? Maybe Moscow is going to be a retirement home for Khamenei next to Bashar al-Assad?
It very well could be. I had a fear that the Iranians, and I think probably they did, but the Russians refused, that the Iranians would essentially ask the Russians to give them a bear hug, to embrace them, to give them an Article 5, that is to say, a nuclear umbrella, so that they would complicate, at the very least, Israeli or American maneuvers with regard to that program. My strong belief is that the Gulf countries told Russia that he should remember that Shia are only 10% of the Islamic world. He has many, many interests with them, and not to do something silly. I think that if it weren't for the Arabs, Putin would have been open to the idea of helping Iran. Obviously, he doesn't have the military capacity to be of much service, but he could have. Sending drones to kill innocent Ukrainians. Correct. He could have implanted enough Russians in Iranian facilities to be able to make it more complex in terms of strategic calculations or tactical calculations by the Israelis and the Americans. My guess is that he looked at what the Chinese would call the correlation of forces and understood that the Iranians had made every conceivable mistake. Excuse me, the regime had made every conceivable mistake over the last 2 years, the most important of which was the loss of Hezbollah, which led to the loss of Syria, which had huge impact on terms of Russia's power in the Eastern Mediterranean, and essentially told the Iranians, look, you've missed every opportunity, or you've taken every opportunity to miss every opportunity, and you're essentially on your own. And I wouldn't be surprised if he said, make a deal. Wow. But I think that he would have been more opportunistic with regard to Iran if you didn't have the Gulf countries making it really clear that Russia should not provide a nuclear lifeline to Iran. It's a speculation.
There are a lot of memes of this missing big guys, Ali Khamenei. Really, everyone asking, where is he right now? Where the future of Iran is going to go? You predict about Aramco. Here we are. As I said, President Trump said that they don't need any negotiation or deal from Iran. Then what is going to happen? The Islamic Republic is going to enrich, again, build nuclear weapons, or they're going to be willing to negotiate with America? I mean, how do you map out the future of Iran under Islamic Republic?
First of all, I wouldn't put too much stock in any one particular tweet from President Trump.
Yeah, because he changes.
Completely. So let's just put that aside. I think that Europe and Israel will demand a treaty. Whether that treaty comes from another ultimatum, which I think they got a week ago and said was no basis for negotiation, which basically was the signal to Trump, okay, well, obviously I'm going to have to do what I have to do. I think they're going to be presented again with an ultimatum during this ceasefire period. And it may very well be that the war will recommence.
Don't forget, it was ceasefire between Israel and Hamas when they killed Hassan Nasrallah. So during ceasefire, anything could happen.
Of course. Of course. These are what you call fast-moving market conditions. Iran is going to have to come to terms, I believe, once again, on the 3 items that John Kerry and I laid out. And by the way, the importance of that was that if John Kerry was telling the regime that they were going to go from Shah to Shahmat, we knew that this would come as a surprise. And the next day, the front page of Kayhan, for pages and pages and pages, was attacking this article. But they have to take it to heart. They're in Shahmat. The king has no more moves. And you do have players who not only have the king in Shahmat, but could just throw the chessboard out the door. And that's the end of not only the regime, but potentially the dismemberment of the country, which I don't think is in anybody's interests. Having said that, if the Iranians don't make a deal on the nuclear, the ballistic missiles, and the Quds Force and terrorism, I believe the war will recommence.
You know what makes me very, shall I say, mad or angry, furious? When I see anti-war activists in the West now sympathizing with the Islamic Republic. You can be anti-war activist and anti-Islamic Republic. What is wrong with these? Okay, I understand the new generation. So they get their information from, the education system here. To be honest, when I ask my friends at Harvard University, Columbia University, the education system, I don't want to say that the entire education system, but they are now being brainwashed to hate America, to hate democracy. Through their TikTok and social media, I see that Osama bin Laden is their hero. They say, I am Hamas. These all makes me sad. But what makes me angry during the war, the 12-day war between Islamic Republic and Israel, I couldn't believe that I'm seeing this in the West. People were holding the flag of the Islamic Republic. You don't see that Iranians holding the flag of Islamic Republic while the bombs were falling. How come they do this? I mean, you tell me that in 21st century, really people here showing their sympathy with the Islamic Republic? I understand that if they ask for the end of war, but I don't get how they don't understand the people of Iran celebrating the death of their killers. Qasem Soleimani was called a hero. CNN, Farid Zakaria. Qasem Soleimani was named hero in university, campus, college, everywhere. People calling Hamas hero. How? I mean, I'm sure that you're dealing with this maybe with your young children or not. I don't know. But a lot of time, I'm surprised when I get the questions from the young generation. Adorable people. But they come to me and they say that how much they hate America because this is all happening in the Middle East, in Iran, because of America. So that's why we are for Hamas. We are for Islamic Republic. And I'm like, wow. Wow.
We live in a time where you have very strange bedfellows. So up until relatively recently, you had this link, and you still do, very, very strongly, between progressive politics and anti-Semitism. Now, there's always been, in terms of right-wing politics, anti-Semitism as well. And you are now starting to see that become more normalized when you have people like Tucker Carlson and, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who clearly do not appreciate the nature of the threat to the United States of Islamism. Islamism is the greatest civilizational challenge that the West has. I'm not talking Islam, I wasn't, I'm not prejudiced against Germans, but I hate Nazis.
I can. I'm coming from a Muslim family, and I have to say, I often get this question in the West, people telling me that, why you hate Islam? I'm like, no, Islam hates me. All the Islamic laws. They kept asking me, why are you against Islam? But nobody asked me why Islamic laws, Sharia laws are all against me. If I show my hair, I go to hell. And people say that I choose to wear it. This is my option. This is my choice. And I'm like, but I was told if I don't cover my hair, I go to hell. So I had two options, to wear it or to go to hell. So this is optional. So I can say that as a woman who lived under Sharia law, under Islamism, I can say that this is a threat. When I see here, people say, shh, you should not criticize Islamic words because you cause Islamophobia. You should not criticize Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthi and Islamic Republic because that might cause Islamophobia.
I don't believe that being Islamophobic is remotely intelligent. I do believe that anyone who is not Islamist phobic is genuinely ignorant. And often incredibly stupid. Islamism is against all of the things that we hold dear. And what the people who are campaigning on campus for Hamas or Hezbollah miss is that these organizations are banned throughout the Arab world. How is it that in the United States, people who know nothing about Islamism and the threat, and I use Hamas and Hezbollah because they're both Islamists, but one Sunni, one Shia, these organizations are banned because they understand that that is a threat to people's rights. But in the United States, you can go out and you can support Hamas and Hezbollah who have so much American blood on their hands. When people say, we've never had, a problem with Iran. We're not at war with Iran. They haven't done anything to us.
Islamic Republic is at war with you.
Iran is the leading sponsor of state terrorism. They have so much American blood on their hands, from Beirut to Khobar to Iraq. All the organizations that they've supported, that sanctuary that they gave to Al-Qaeda. Americans are ignorant, historically ignorant. Henry Kissinger said that Americans are historically ignorant. And he was shocked at the kinds of things that people hang on to. Like you said, I don't know how widespread it was, but to say Osama bin Laden was right, Yahya Sinwar,
Yes.
I mean, the greatest joke in modern times is that Yahya Sinwar brought down Iran, a takfir, a Sunni Ikhwan takfir, pulled the thread in what Nasrallah used to call the spider's web that would bring down Israel, and it led to the complete unraveling of the Iranian Empire.
We should have another conversation about that. I want to add this. Phobia is an irrational fear. But my fear and the fear of millions of women who lived under Sharia laws, who lived under Islamic laws, is rational. Absolutely rational. And I am scared of Islamism. So I don't really care whether people label me or not. Let me change the topic. We talk too much about the death commanders and the dictators, but let's talk about good things. You are supporting the big cats, lions, tigers. Tell me, I think there's connection to Iran as well. So I wanna hear about that.
There is a connection to Iran. I've always been able to draw a distinction between politics and the higher pursuits in art, culture, the environment. I was once asked a question as we were bringing our art collection to Beijing. I was asked by a reporter, you seem to be such a humanist, building bridges between different cultures, using art and the universality of beauty to accomplish that. How do you square that with your hostility to the regime in Iran? And I said, you know, one day in Iran, that regime will be gone, and I will be happy to have an exhibition there of Rembrandt. I said, right now, the regime uses its museums and its wall spaces to host and promote contests for the, quote, best cartoons regarding the Holocaust. If that's how the regime sees itself, I know that my struggle must continue. And if that's how the regime sees itself, then I don't think God's going to be on their side.
It's not.
And clearly, he or she isn't. Ahura Mazda has shown the power of truth.
I want
The Druge is the regime.
I want the entire world to understand that they should not be in their side, in the side of the Islamic Republic. That's my dream, because I don't think this is too much to ask.
You know, let's just put, a picture can paint 1,000 words. Years ago, when he was creating United Against Nuclear Iran, Mark Wallace sent a letter to Caterpillar and said, your cranes are being used to hang Iranians. Stop it. They ignored him. So he took over the wall space of the building across from Caterpillar and put up a mural of an Iranian hanging from a crane.
Iranian regime.
Caterpillar stopped doing business with Iran immediately. The idea that feminists for the Islamic Republic, or for Hamas or Hezbollah, queers for Palestine, really? When the only place where someone, can be on, hanging on to their partners or whatever, at a gay pride parade in Tel Aviv, in Tehran, they'd just be hanging or they'd be thrown off a building. So that just shows the abject stupidity of so many of those who are out there chanting. And I think one of the reasons, unfortunately, is that anti-Zionism is almost always, if you scratch the surface, anti-Semitism. The idea that people would support the Islamic Republic persecuting women, persecuting minorities, persecuting homosexuals, persecuting other religious faiths, and not understand the circumstances in which Israel finds itself doing, as you said, as the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, said, doing the world's dirty work for it. Israel is doing the dirty work that the world needs to be doing with regard to Iran. And for that, they should be getting expressions of gratitude, not antipathy.
Tom, I lost everything. My family, my home, freedom, moving between safe houses. Lost a lot of things, but not hope. So I hope I'm going to invite you to Iran. Our next conversation is going to be in Hamadan, as you said, Shiraz, Isfahan, somewhere that we can celebrate freedom together.
I would love that. I'd love that, Masih.
Thank you so much. Shaking hands between men and women is like, wow. Shaking the pillars of Islam, let's do it.
And I want to hug you as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a great privilege. It's been a great honor. And all I can say is women, life, freedom.
Zan zandagi azadi. Thank you. How about Europe? Are they any better at Islamism, anti-Semitism?
Thus far, not really. There are reasons for that. First of all, the Muslim populations in Europe are far larger as a percentage than you have in the United States. The United States, as multicultural as it is, does not have that kind of natural, large Muslim population that has yet real political power. I mean, we saw a hint of it perhaps in Michigan in the last presidential election, but it's nothing in terms of the challenges of trying to keep social equilibrium that you see in France or England or Germany or Belgium. In other words, there's a voter bloc there, and they have been radicalized to a far greater extent than we've seen in the United States. So the reality is that the Europeans are even more circumspect when it comes to doing the right thing regarding Islamism. They must make a distinction between the peaceful practice of Islam and those who are radicalized. In the same way as in a democracy, most people practice democracy in a peaceful way, but you always have extremists who are communists or fascists. It happens. But within political Islam, or the impact of political Islam, it's much stronger in Europe right now.
Tom, I grew up in a society where I was told that I had to shout death to Israel as loud as Tel Aviv would shake. And I was not alone, alongside millions of schoolgirls, children. We had to hate Jews. We had to hate Israel. That's how we could survive. We could get an education. Whew. It's beyond sad. I remember those days that I was told that I had to burn the flag of Israel. Nowadays, you see that the Iranians are chanting death to Islamic Republic as loud as the Beit, Ali Khamenei's Beit, shakes. But tell me about the traditional relation between the Jews and Persian Iranians.
The first thing that I can say is that up until October 7th, I had not met an Israeli who wanted to go to war against Iran.
Islamic Republic.
Oh, unfortunately, it would have meant going to war against Iran itself.
Oh, yeah, you're right. In this case, you were right.
Thank you. I say that reluctantly because as someone who is a Persophile, who is someone who so admires Persian history, which was one of the reasons why I decided to pursue history in my studies, was my appreciation for Cyrus the Great. Many people don't know that the only non-Jew, non-Hebrew, who is called a Messiah in the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible, the only one is Kurosh. He's a hero to Jews to this day. There are very, very few Philo-Semites, those who really went out of their way to help our people. Now, there are a lot of historical reasons, and the fact was that it was the nature of the Achaemenid regime not to persecute people unnecessarily. If they paid their taxes and they provided the services they need, it was a complete and utter transformation of the world that had existed with the Assyrians and the Babylonians, who tormented the Jews, the Israelites, and took them captive to Babylon. When Cyrus the Great took Babylon, one of the early moves that he made, and it wasn't just for the Jews, but one of the early moves that he made was to allow the Jews to return to Zion. Not only that, he said that Persia would pay for the rebuilding of the Jewish temple, which had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Jews never forgot this. He is the ultimate hero for the Jewish people. Most Jews in Israel don't remember what it was like before 1979, when the closest relationship that Israel had in the region was with first Iran and secondly Turkey. Ironically, because now Turkey is one of the other challenges to Israel in the region. But those who do remember what it was like remember Iran as a place where they could feel very, very comfortable. The Shah's regime was willing to tolerate minorities, and people could live their lives knowing that the Jews had been in Babylon and Mesopotamia before the Persians, in the same way as they were in many parts of the Arab world before the Arabs. So we don't start with a natural hatred. We start with a natural willingness to love the Iranians. There's no hatred there. There is hatred for the regime. And there you have to draw a distinction. They hate the regime because they know what the regime would do if one day they had no air defenses. If one day there was no one to block them from attacking them, they know that this regime would tear them to pieces. This regime would rape, burn, and destroy entire families because they want to. The late Hossein Salami once said something extremely interesting. He said, one day we will go from house to house in Tel Aviv, avenging the blood of every martyr. House to house. This concept of invasion and slaughter is very much a part of this regime's DNA.
And that's what they're doing to the people right now. So that's why I believe that only if the Islamic Republic is gone, then Iran will rise again. The entire Middle East will benefit from an Iran without the Islamic Republic.
More than that, I remember telling my friends in the Gulf, the most natural allies on so many levels, intellectually, in terms of a particular cleverness and dynamic, in terms of shared, common, positive history, the most natural allies in the Middle East are Israel and Iran. And I hope that one day we will see that alliance restored. I can only say from the Israelis that I know, they would welcome it with open arms. They do not want to hurt the Iranian people.
So then you should promise to take me to Israel and I will take you to Iran.
You have it. We have a deal.
Deal.